Hey, what's up, everyone? Another episode of the NewOrleans.Football podcast. We are in studio with Mike Triplett today, the Better Call Botto studio. And Sean Payton is our guest today, presented by Desi Vegas Steakhouse on St. Charles Avenue. Make sure you go check them out. And as always, we are presented by That Wrap Company. So if you want your car to look cooler than it has ever looked, or if you want some signage for your business, make sure you hit them up. They're a cost-effective form of advertising, and they specialize in graphic design, custom and commercial vehicle wraps, wall murals, and storefront signage. Whether you're wanting to give your car a fresh new look or you want to transform the face of your business, DWC can help get you noticed. Call them today, 985-237-4781, or check them out on Instagram. That's That Wrap Company. Check out their work. It looks amazing. And if you need legal help with any of the following: car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, maritime and Jones Act, hurricane and storm claims, you better call Botto at 504-323-4777 or 985-677-1085 for your free consultation and case review, BottoLaw.com. And make sure you check out our guys at Firehouse Subs, Veteran Boulevard location. They put a ton of money into the community. So when you buy food there, you can rest assured that they are supporting the community you love. So we have a great show. Check it out. Sean Payton, NewOrleans.Football podcast, starting now. Let's go.
We in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
We in the dome right now. We in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
As you can tell, last year it was an off year. But we reloaded and now it is our boss year. A Devo back there and yeah, we got the badger. Don't forget my son and don't forget the pass rush. Jameis QB1 dropping down to MT. Handed off the Alvin with the quick feet. So when you see the Saints marching, yeah, we gon' trouble you. At the Super Bowl party, eating on them doubles. We in the dome right now. We in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
We in the dome right now. We in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
Hey, guys, we're real excited about today's show. You guys know NewOrleans.Football podcast. I'm Nick Underhill. He's Mike Triplett. Mike, how you doing? Thanks for being here.
I'm doing all right, but I mean, I've been on the job for less than a week, and you're already like, this isn't working out. We need to get Sean Payton in to generate some buzz. So I guess that was last week's news.
Yeah, so we hit the favors today. We got Sean on today's podcast. The interview is great. I promise you, good insight into a lot of stuff. We asked him a bunch of questions that we had never asked him before. So excited to play that one for you guys. We're going to start that right now. And again, it's brought to you by Desi Vegas Steakhouse. Make sure you check them out, St. Charles Avenue. And here's Sean. And we're joined now by our guest, Sean Payton. You guys obviously all know this gentleman that's on the screen with us right now. Coach, how you doing? Thanks for coming on.
I'm doing well. I appreciate you guys having me on. Everything's good. Week 2 of the NFL's wrapped up, and if you forget how quickly things go once the season starts, you know. But even as a fan or someone working to some degree in the media, it's amazing how you get through training camp and then it's like bang.
I'm curious, what's your week like now? Like, how do you study the league? How do you watch the league? How is your process of how you interact with football changed?
Well, it changes dramatically just from a time standpoint, but nonetheless, essentially I get into LA on a Saturday. There's some production stuff we do. Occasionally there's a feature we do, like we did one last week. And then early morning Sunday, we're over at Fox Studios really early because there's 2 shows. And the first show that comes on 10 o'clock your time is NFL Kickoff. So that's hosted by Carissa. That starts at 8 a.m. really West Coast time. So you just work backwards there from prep, rehearsal, all the other stuff. And then the second show comes on what would be 11 o'clock your time, an hour leading up to the games. And the thing that's interesting on game day, that is, when the pregame's done and the games are on, I didn't realize that, they do a halftime for every game, like, for every, like, and so you do a halftime segment if you're coming out of the Giants Titans game or the Saints Falcons game or because the timing of each is a little different. So we do that, and we're back kind of in that TV room where all the monitors are watching all the games, preparing for post game, and then another halftime segment, and then another post game based on the time and how much time's left before the primetime television comes on. So Sundays are pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty interesting to see how it works. I got to be honest with you, and being around that group that's been together for so long certainly is helpful. Usually I travel back Monday. I'm up here now, up in Idaho for a few more weeks, and then still have a place in New Orleans. So I'll probably at some point get closer to LA so the commute's, easier, just for the season at least. And then, having the ability to look at the all 22 during the week, if you're wanting to pull up a game or you're wanting to pull up several teams maybe that might be featured that weekend. But it's nothing like the analysis or study that takes place, during the week when you're coaching. It's just a whole different level. But it's good. All of us want to get into a routine, and I feel like I'm finally getting into a routine a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, are you still stealing ideas? Are you making notes of maybe things that you like? Or
yeah, you want to stay on top of like trends and what's going on, and so yeah, you'll put a reel together, and maybe a touchdown reel, a red zone reel, a third down reel, stuff that are just things you see. I enjoy doing that.
Sean, do you already know right now that you want to coach in 2023?
That's a good question. I would say this: I really enjoy what I'm doing right now, and more maybe than I thought. If the right situation presented itself, Mike, I would definitely be interested in. And there's no utopia, if you will, when it comes to teams. But if I felt like it was the right situation, I would have an interest in that. That all being said, that could come in a year, that could come in 2 years. In the meantime, though, you do get immersed with what you're currently doing. Like you want to be good at it and not just doing it. And so I've kind of just been focused on that. But I said this over the weekend. This past weekend's game versus Tampa was the first time that I had like a version of FOMO. Where I was jealous of everyone that was there, including random Bruce Arians on the sideline.
If we know now, we'll know you're going to miss it when the next time we're like, wait, was that pan back over? Was that Sean standing on the sideline? Who let him?
Yeah, I want that invite, and then I'll chirp with some players.
All right. Well, you are, luckier than most. I assume that you're going to have the chance to be picky when you do decide whether to get back in it. What you don't have to spell out everything, but what are some of the parameters that are going to have to be in place? Like, what's it going to take to get you back?
It's one. I think the most important element is just functional ownership, front office. Just the leadership spots have to be. Because there's a handful of teams that aren't, and those teams, regardless of what takes place, they can win on Sunday, but they have trouble winning long term. And so just the opportunity to win consistently and the willingness to build the correct culture and all of those things.
Sean, how important was this time away for you? Can you feel the effects on mental health and all that stuff? Do you feel better? Do you feel like you needed to do this?
Absolutely. I got I got a funny voicemail yesterday from Parcells, and he had just seen the weekend's broadcast, and um, he said, "You look 20 pounds lighter. You don't have 5 chins, and, and you look like you're getting plenty of rest and you're working out." And yeah, it's nice to golf a lot, and you obviously get more sleep. So um, I think the way you burn sometimes, at least for me, um, this kind of took place in 12, not intentionally, but nonetheless, it was a chance to recharge the battery a little bit before coming back to the 13th season. Um, and I think hopefully, I'm quite certain this is doing the same thing.
And I'm just like over the years of coaching, as you were trying to form an offensive identity, I'm sure that changed from year to year based on who you had and the things you're able to do. What was that process like? And how long did it often take you guys to figure out, okay, these are the things we're good at, and this is how we're gonna go about generating offense?
Yeah, look, sometimes faster than others as far as the time it took. It always was driven by our personnel, you know, and you just go back to these unique players we've had, whether it's Reggie Bush and Deuce in that first year, and then the combination of Colston and Debris and Lance Moore. I'm just, hitting a few Meacham the next year, and Pierre Thomas, the running backs. How do we deploy those 3 or 4 guys, and how do we deploy the tight ends? We've had a number of tight ends, obviously, with Jimmy and Jeremy, and look, Ernie year one, Sprolsey. I'm what I'm saying though is, as those pieces come in and out of your building and you acquire unique skill sets, I think you begin to think of, books that are for them, plays that make sense for them. And then the same thing's taking place with the evolution of the learning curve of the quarterback, and Drew's building on what he knows. And so you see it, I think, even today with, you put on the Buffalo Bill offense, for instance, and man, it's impressive. And yet it's evolved, and to their credit, has evolved quickly around the skill sets of those guys. And so, we see it throughout the league with teams that are pretty good on offense. And I think that's the most important part, that it evolves around who you have in it.
And just you mentioned you watched the Saints this weekend. Just what have you seen from Jameis and his development and how he's continued to settle in?
Yeah, look, the week one, man, they got in the hurry up, and it really flipped that game around with their no huddle, their tempo. There were some big explosive plays, and that was exciting to see. That they had struggled earlier prior to that. We're 2 weeks in, and it sounds like, I don't know this, but Alvin's a little dinged up. His presence, I think will be felt sooner than later. But in the meantime, I thought last week was just how we expected it to be. It's going to be a hard fought defensive game. There were some, tough penalties, I thought, late in the game, and then Ingram's fumble, and then the other turnovers that came. I mean, look, it was similar to the game that was played in Tampa last year, only it was Tampa that made those mistakes, and New Orleans that got those breaks. And this year it was flipped. The script was flipped. And so when you're playing in one of those really low scoring games, and there's, look, the margin for error is very, very slim then. And so a turnover can really change the result fast. And I think that, you had 2 really good defenses playing. I don't think the fight had anything to do with the outcome or the result of the game. It was just a byproduct of a lot of emotions. But nonetheless, I think it comes down to some small details.
Sean, a question that I've always had with Jameis, but especially after that game with all those missed deep shots early to Chris Olave. we're so used to thinking what this offense is, quote unquote, watching Drew Brees run it, and even Teddy Bridgewater, who was a similar style quarterback. But then obviously Jameis Winston brings that deep shot element. How much of throws like that are Pete dialed it up and said, I think we've got a shot here, or Jameis is like, I want to take this shot here, whereas Drew might have said, I'll take the free 7-yard throw to Jarvis. How much of that is quarterback dependent?
Well, it's a little both. There's a couple different sections on the call sheet that are aggressive shot plays. And so, if I call a certain play or Pete calls a certain play, and the quarterback receives that in his ear, he knows, this is going to be a top-down read. It's how does this look? How does this look or come underneath to a back or tight end? Versus a play that has a lot of reads in it and ends up being a deep completion to Jarvis last week on like a sail route or a tiered route. Different deal there. That's a little bit more coverage predicated in a progression read. So, yeah, I think there's times when plays come in over the headset where the QB thinks we're going to be aggressive here, but not at all cost, and then we're going to, progress through this play, but it's probably a little bit more top-down read.
Am I wrong, though, to think the evaluation of Jameis is, can he be the guy that's willing to take those? I'm just throwing to Alvin on this play. I'm just throwing a slant to Mike on this play. I mean, is that a big part of his evolution?
Yeah, ultimately the evaluation is, and this sounds simple, but it starts with wins and losses. It starts with ball security. It starts with operating. Now the offense will evolve per the quarterback, but it still is about getting your team into the end zone. And it's still, it's still winning football, moving the football, and scoring touchdowns and being effective. Now that can vary week to week. It's going to be more difficult, for instance, some weeks than others, but ultimately that's how they're evaluated.
All right, and then a more lighthearted question about Jameis. I have to get your reaction. Probably the most classic moment since he's been a Saint, when he comes over to you on the sideline in New England last year after that touchdown to Marcus Callaway, and he explains to you that it was God's plan. So how do you react to that?
Well, I'll tell you, and look, we laugh about it, and I love him, and shoot, the journey he's been on, but you're in the midst of a game, and look, we were very fortunate on that play, and he said to me, that was God's plan, and I said, I'm not going to use the swear word. I said, the bleeping Patriots have a God too. That's exactly what was said. And so it was all good. It's a lot easier when it's a touchdown rather than an interception.
Sean, how much did the offense change when you brought Jameis in? And then also in 17, when Drew started to change a little bit his game and you guys changed the offense, how much over the years did you guys kind of take things from the playbook and kind of really change them up for the quarterback?
What's funny is obviously we pull out a 2006 game plan and just looked at it. And you're like, whoa, all right. And then you pull out, let's just go to 8, and you look at it, and then you go to 10. And so it's funny. It's like a time-lapse camera of ourselves right now. And so it'd be like, how much have things changed since you were 19? And you're like, well, a lot's changed, but I can't recall when any of it specifically changed.
Yeah.
It's just there's a little bit of that to what takes place when you're at one place for 16 years. So, but clearly there are elements though, when the quarterbacks are different. I think one of the big challenges, honestly, is Teddy, Taysom, and Jameis were all exposed in meeting rooms during football seasons to Drew in a good way, meaning they were on the team, they were in the meetings, they were observing him play as a starter. Now, the trick to that was they were observing Drew in year 16 and the offense in year 16. And so I'd said this a couple times. Pete and I talked about it. Like when Teddy came in after Drew's injury, or, when Taysom was playing, or when Jameis came in as the starter, you don't have to be Drew in year 16 relative to how we're operating the offense. That evolved. And so taking steps backwards relative to how we communicate or run things is not a bad thing. So I just wanted them to understand that, hey, be your best version of quarterback. And because they were getting exposed to something different than like Burnell was getting exposed to. Mark was getting exposed to like some of the early, ground floor stuff. So everything made sense. But as it evolved, it became not more complex, but certainly there were things that began to change that were different. And but ultimately, though, to answer your question, look, yeah, how we called games and how we game plan was dependent on who was playing quarterback, and still and always will be. What suits them.
And I'm sure they got your input on this, but even if they didn't, if Mrs. Benson, Mickey, Dennis, all them came to you and they said, "Hey, what's the pitch for Dennis Allen to be a head coach here or somewhere in the league?" What are some of the things that you saw being around him, how he developed, that you feel like makes him well suited for this job?
Well, number one, look, having firsthand exposure over that long a period of time is invaluable when I mean, he was hired in 06. He was on our first staff. So he's someone that I would say wears well in the building, is well thought of by everyone. He's very organized, very accomplished. The defense drastically improved when he took over. And so he showed leadership in that role. And all the other intangibles, work ethic, sense of humor, humility. I mean, things that you look for in a head coach were present. And so the success rate with that type of intimate knowledge with someone is much higher than someone that you try to gain that information from in the period of a 2-day interview. And so I think it made complete sense, and I think he'll do a fantastic job.
All right, we got some fun ones we came up since we have this opportunity to really pick your brain. Who's the one defensive player that just you hated going against? He wrecked your plans.
Opponents. Gosh, there've been a lot of guys, that we've had to, the really good pass rushers over the years. I mean, we had Ware in Dallas was a problem. Khalil Mack, we've had game plans for. Those are out of the division guys. But the defensive tackle with the Rams, I'm drawing a blank now. Why?
Donald, the current? Yeah. Aaron Donald?
Yeah, I mean, those guys up front have been issues in the division. There've been a handful of guys in the division. Back Carolina had those Peppers, and those guys were problematic. In Atlanta, who's the inside defensive tackle that gets off on the snap count like a half second? He's still playing.
Well, Gerald McCoy did that. Gerald McCoy did that to you guys a lot.
McCoy, but then this guy's still there. Grady Jarrett, yeah, he's a pain. And then, I'm trying to think of the corners that you're always alert for that, that had great ball skills. Norman was one in Carolina. I think we had Rondé Barber early in those Saints years. So there's a handful of those guys. The real good linebacker for Tampa was there, right at the beginning. He was a problem. The Will linebacker. Why am I having
not David? You're saying back in you're saying back in the early years?
I'm going. Yeah, David is still a problem, but I'm talking about before him, the Hall of Fame player.
You didn't. You went against Derek Brooks? I can't get my timeline right.
Yeah, Brooks was there. And then we worked Brooks out, brought him in, but more recent division problems. This would be a good one. Levante's been fantastic now, and with the addition of their other linebacker, those two are pretty formidable. Kuechly and Davis, those guys gave us plenty of fits, and I'm sure I'm missing a handful of headaches. That's a long period of time of defensive players. Man, Urlacher in those Bears teams, he was really good inside.
Is there any one player that you used to watch and you were like, man, I really wish I could have coached this guy?
Steve Smith was that one guy. We'd get chirpy with each other, and he was competitive. He'd definitely be one of those guys.
So the guys you were chirping with, those are usually the guys you respected?
Probably means I have a lot of respect for.
That's funny. That's funny. Oh, well, along those same lines, so we know this story about how close you guys came to drafting Pat Mahomes. It's been told so many times. Are there any we don't know about? Are there any that you were this close to this guy could have been a Saint?
Yeah, I'm sure there are. They run together, some of them differently than others. We were close to drafting the guard from LSU that went to Carolina, offensive guard.
Trey Turner?
Yeah, we really liked him. I'm just going back through the drafts. Obviously, like I can remember picks in the selection. Sometimes it's hard to remember, all right, who else was on the board. I remember when we selected Teron Armstead, the cloud that year had like 5 players in that cloud. One of them was the big, tall quarterback that went to Tampa.
Yeah,
Glennon. He was in that cloud. So you remember those discussions relative to each selection. It's the one time of the year. It's I'm being serious now. The first time when you miss coaching is when the draft time came, because I enjoy it, A, and then B, you're also going to miss out on a whole class. What I mean by that, the video, the reads, it's like, regardless of whether you get the player or not, obviously, let's say you read 280 players or 300 players that you watch film on, maybe give or take, you get a frame of reference for those players. And so of that group, let's say 15 end up on your team via draft or free agency, but you still have a little database in your brain on these guys as they go around the league, and you remember them. So when you miss out on that one season, it's like the 2012 draft. I don't remember I don't have any reference for Russell Wilson, for instance. I wasn't there for that draft. And so that's the first thing, honestly, when I stepped away, that's the first thing I missed, which came, a few months after the fact.
Was your email still working? Like you were still getting some of these reports? Or
No, it wouldn't be email. It'd be those, man, we would sit in that big draft meeting room, and it was kind of a process that I enjoyed. But you'd sit in that meeting room, and you'd be 20 guys in that meeting room, scouts, coaches, front office, Mickey, and the whole crew of us, right? And you'd look at the tight ends, and it might take a whole day to do the tight ends, and you'd bring in lunch, you'd bring in dinner, and you'd go home at 8 at night. and you finish the tight ends. The next day you were going to start with offensive guards and centers. And so that was like a 15-day process. It was pretty thorough, and you just spent a lot of time on fit, measurables, film, and then how do you rank them? And then so the easy part is to stack a position group, like stack the tight ends or stack the receivers. I mean, we can all, but it was the horizontal comparisons when you're looking at, let's say, the Mike linebacker versus the tight end, or the corner versus the receiver. I meaning, like, so once you stack the position group and you had grades, first, second, third, fourth round grades, and within those rounds, the more challenging element was the overall board stack in making the cross comparisons. That was always interesting.
Well, we're going on one of the stories that's been out there. 2020, Breeze is thinking about going away, and there was some talk about maybe you guys looking at Tom Brady. Is that a real thing? And how close was that to maybe happening?
Well, I think, man, if you recall, after that what was Drew's last year?
2020 COVID year.
So yeah, after 2019, I'm sorry. Yeah.
After the 19 season, I know, and Drew would say this, that he was considering retiring. I mean, strongly, like, and in fact, right after that season, I believe there was an event in DC that Steve Gleason was being honored. And so it was COVID, I think, or maybe not COVID, but the timing of how we're going to do this, talk about Drew's announcement of retirement, and then Gleason's event took place, and then the Pro Bowl soon after. And then Drew had time where he was really just considering it, giving it a second thought, and gradually arriving at a decision where he wants to play another year. And so, to answer your question, certainly that was something that we were entertaining. Now, Drew was still on the roster, so it was just, preparing for that. So the unique thing was, we emotionally, I remember our meeting, Drew and I visiting in the office, like, Monday or Tuesday after that season ended, and just reflecting on everything. And this was it. And I didn't try to talk him out of it. I was just a little bit, like, not surprised. I guess it was kind of like, I guess things like this come, here's the time. And, but it's pretty emotional. And so the following year, when he was retiring, it was like, well, we already did that last year. So we're not going to cry any more tears. You and I already had this moment. Anyway, no, I think that, yeah, Tom was definitely someone that was discussed and talked about as a possible plan B if it didn't work out with Drew. And then Drew returned, and then Tom went to Tampa. I mean, it's crazy. Our league's crazy.
Last one I got, just watching Mike Thomas. Does he look like Mike Thomas? Did you see a lot of those same traits?
Yeah. He looks good. And you can see it. And, you kind of saw a glimpse of it, and then more at Atlanta, and I was happy for him. But he looks healthy, and he also looks, all the things that you love about him, his spirit and how he plays. That's been good to watch. So I'm happy for him.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you very much, Coach. This has been great. We could probably do another hour of this, but you look like you have a good day waiting for you.
Yeah, I'm going to be back in New Orleans soon, and I'll look you guys up, and hopefully maybe you can invite me to that, like, elaborate studio set that you're in.
Oh yeah, we got a seat for you for sure. Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks a lot, Sean.
Hey, I miss you guys, and we'll talk soon.
There was some really good stuff there from Sean Payton. I feel like got a little bit of insight into some stuff. I would have liked a more specific answer on the draft stuff, because I know there has to be someone other than Turner that he thinks about missing out on in the draft. But overall, I thought that was
He should have. I mean, we should have prepped him and said, just say Justin Jefferson. The fans will love you. Just say we had the trade in place. If he had fallen one more spot, we're going to move up for Justin Jefferson. That's all he had to say.
Would they have loved him, or would that have just made them just even more angry about everything?
I'm like,
else?
Sean, I can feed you some answers. I've been on Twitter.
Really, the only thing I think we got to cover, they got Carolina this weekend. They're going there, and then they head off to London. I think suddenly it kind of feels like a critical stretch on their schedule, whereas before it was kind of like, oh, they should win 4 of the first 5 games or whatever. But like, it feels like they really need to get some work done. Do you feel like they'll be able to figure out what they need to do on offense to succeed this week against the Panthers?
I think the offense will be clunky based on what we've seen. I think it'll be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back for a while. But I think that can add up to 20 plus points. I think they can have a whole good quarter. I think they can have, 2 good drives in a row that both produce points. They can have back-to-back touchdown drives. They can, when they finally start rushing the passer, get some turnovers and some short fields. So I'm not worried about how many points did they have before the hurry up offense against Atlanta? I don't even remember.
Not many. No,
none.
They were struggling.
And then obviously only 3 against Tampa Bay for a while. I think that's going to go away. I think they're going to score in the 20s again and figure that out routinely. But I don't think it's going to be a smooth running machine for a while. There's just we said it a million times, there's too much firepower in this offense for them not to put together 5 scoring drives in a game.
I think that we're going to see Pete Carmichael come into this game and have ways to get quote unquote easy money. And I think that he's going to do more things to generate rhythm, because Jameis looks good when he does that. And he talked so much this offseason about how he wanted to hit the quicker timing throws, be in rhythm. He worked on the accuracy there. They just need to go out there and they need to do it. I think they're going to find ways to do it. But I agree with you. I think it's going to be a little bit of a rickety ride. But it's fine. It can be a little bit up and down over the next 3 weeks.
24 points. If you sign the Saints up for 24 points a game this year, in every game, exactly 24, I think that's a playoff team.
Yeah.
They don't need to, there's going to be some games where they need to win a shootout, but, it shouldn't be that hard to get in the 20s.
They should be able to hold Carolina to not a lot of points. Same thing against Minnesota and same thing against Seattle. So I think that gives you 3 weeks to figure out.
Minnesota will be interesting.
Yeah,
Speaking
Minnesota.
of Justin Jefferson.
Yeah. I think Marshawn's going to play. That's the kind of game where he, he loves those heavyweight battles. But I think they got 3 games here to kind of figure things out on offense. And if they can win 2 out of the 3, I think you're in okay shape.
This one's pretty important. You don't want to turn London into a must-win game.
Well, you don't want to fly there.
Yeah, you don't want to go on that plane being like, this season's on the brink. On the during that week, you don't want that hanging over that week. So. Although they've always, we said this the other day, they've always responded well. What was their record in 17 when they went to London? Were they 0-3 when they went there, or were they 1-2? But they started that horrible 0-2, and then did they go right to London? But obviously everything changed after that in 2017. That's when we found that was like the beginning of the Alvin Kamara.
It's interesting. Like 17 after week 2, the way they played the Patriots, like people thought they were just not going to be good. They thought the offense or the defense was really poor, and we had seen them in training camp that whole summer look really good on defense, and it was baffling why they looked so bad after week 2. And then, like you said, the Carolina, and then they found out Ken Crawley could play cornerback, which was a pivotal thing in 17. Like he caught a wave and just managed to ride it until the end, and it just never stayed there beyond that season. But yeah, London was a critical trip for them, so it's kind of funny that there's a little bit of a parallel here.
And what was the year of Seattle? Bridgewater year? Did they made the playoffs?
That was
Mike
19.
Offensive, and things were going horrible then. Before that turned their season around too. Were they 0-2 after the Rams game? And then so I guess it's not push the panic button if they lose to Carolina, but it feels like you don't want that hanging over.
Yeah, I think we got to see how the coaches respond to all this too. Like it used to be Sean Payton, and you could kind of take for granted that all right, he's going to figure this out, and this is how it's going to get fixed. I think that same DNA is there in Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael, and I think they'll find the cures for the stuff that's ailing them. But that is something that a new coaching staff, I think, does have to prove. Pete's kind of the main OC now for the first time since that 12 season. So there are some things that they need to show. I have confidence they'll figure it out. I think these next 3 games they get back on track, and I think they'll be okay. But a lot does depend on Jameis's back. I mean, that's a serious thing. I think Alvin needs to get on the field. They need to get a Debo on the field, and they just got to figure out how to fix some of this stuff really quick.
Yeah, that's a lot of injuries to those three big names that have caused an effect. But to think that we think those guys are all coming back soon,
Yeah.
That's a pretty complete team. You get all those guys, just three guys, those three guys healthy, which we expect soon. That's a pretty complete team. They should be playing well.
Yeah. That's all we got for this episode of the NewOrleans.Football podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, all that stuff. Check out the website, more coverage throughout the week of this game. And we will not be back on the podcast until next Thursday. We will be traveling to London and time zones and all that stuff. But me, Trip, and DJ will be out there all week getting you all the coverage from overseas. So thanks for listening to this show, and we'll be back.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now.